Hello dear students. Today we're going to talk about one of the most interesting and one of the most difficult topics in terms of the global issues. It's about the climate change. And we're going to talk about a little bit what is climate change, how we understand it, what are the reasons and measurements, how we can measure the climate change, such complicated issue. We're going to talk about the importance of the climate change both for political science and political process, for economy, and also for the social life. We will focus on the politics of the climate change and in the climate change. What are the main efforts that the humanity is doing and what different countries are doing in terms to stop the climate change, and definitely about the economy of climate change. So what is the price of these deeds and of the actions that we are doing in this sphere? But let us start with some of the interesting data. So the World Economic Forum published like the top 10 risks over the next 10 years study, and they publish in every 10 years. So probably we were discussing this on the previous lessons. As you can see, the issues that are connected with the environment, they here are the green, so we can see the majority of these issues that are present, like the climate action failure, biodiversity loss, extreme weather, natural disasters, and human-made environmental disasters. So all these crises with the most influential impact are present on the prognosis of the next 10 years. But you can see that they are put it here according to the impact. But if you take the same study, if you take the same research and look on the likelihood, you can see that the majority of the most possible influences are really of the environmental reason. So all these 5 out of most 10 important to World Economic Forum reasons are actually of the environmental origin. And that is why the World Economic Forum made a very interesting and important conclusion. The climate change is striking much more harder and more rapidly than many expected. That is why probably the next 10 years until the 2023, there are a number of different issues that are connected with the climate change. But what is climate change overall? We are talking about this, we're talking about the environmental security, but what is climate change? So actually, climate change is very simple. The notion of climate change is very simple. This is a changing of the temperature and on the climate conditions in the world. And this is very natural thing. So it's not like it was not created like on the nearest times. It was always present, this issue of the climate change during the whole history of our world. So you can see that our planet is getting some sun rays that pass through atmosphere. Some of them stay here, some of them are going to the space, and because of the atmosphere, we have a possibility to a little bit to warmer our conditions, and it's called the greenhouse effect. And we are now considering the greenhouse effect to be one of the damaging issues because of the people actions. But in generally, without greenhouse effect, our life would not be possible, because Earth would be at least 30 degrees Celsius colder, making an average temperature in the tropics around minus 10 degrees of Celsius. So this is a very natural process. But is climate change a new phenomena? Actually, no. The climate change started nearly 50 million years ago, and it follows the whole process of the existence of our Earth. So nearly 35 million years ago, the Antarctic was actually cooling, and we have the ice shield around this around Antarctica, and also later we have the process of the very natural cooling of our planet. And around 2.5 million years ago, actually the northern hemisphere ice was created, and so-called the Ice Age began. And through this period of time, through Ice Age, this process of natural cooling of our planet is what we see. What is interesting here that sometimes we see the changes actually in climate and in temperature that is happening once per 100,000 years. So we have this temperature that is going up and going down, and this is also a very natural process. And as I told, once per 100,000 years, we have the very natural process of more warmer temperatures and more cooler temperatures. And this is because Earth's orbit changes with the respect to the sun. Also, we can have the influence on the climate change and on the temperature change with the very natural things, like with the volcano eruptions. You probably know that this Vesuvius volcano eruption and the tragedy of Pompeii, that is very well known, but we had a number of such volcano eruptions in the terms of our history. And what is happening here, that after the huge and big eruptions, so we have these emissions in the air that are blocking a little bit the possibility of sun rays getting to the Earth. That is why usually our temperature is lower. So we definitely know that the Great Famine of the 14th century in Europe was created by the huge volcano eruption, probably in the New Zealand. And the most powerful volcano eruption is connected with the Mount Tambora in the Indonesia, in the 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars, that actually caused the effect that we know right now by the year without a summer. So it was so huge that it caused the cooling to 3-4 degrees of Celsius, and the summer was really, really cold. But besides of this huge event that happens on the Europe, and that influenced definitely the weather conditions and the environmental conditions, it also unfortunately caused a big famine with more than 200,000 deaths. And this was a complicated story because it was a little bit also the influence of the Napoleonic War, and exactly after this part, the Great Famine was present. But it also influenced not only deaths and the way how we live, but also such things as our literature, for example, and as our and arts actually that we used to do in that period of time. For example, if you look on the different paintings, and if you look on different artworks during that period, you can see that they are really, really great. So this is one of example, but you can see the many more in the British and, for example, in the Dutch artist. But also this year 1816 is also connected with the literature, and we definitely know that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was created during that period of time. So this event also influenced our mood. We also probably you remember most recent volcano eruptions, like of Mount Pinatubo in Philippines in 91, that actually cooled global temperature for about 2-3 years, nearly for 1 degree. And this beautiful volcano in Iceland, that I can't pronounce this naming, in 2010, we all know these photos, and it also caused global cooling for approximately 1 degree of Celsius for the 2 years. So volcano eruption are also very natural process that influence our changes in the environment. But definitely old tragedy in this situation that we were discussing very natural processes, while definitely human beings and our activity are not really natural in this process, and because the the carbon emissions that are helping to sustain this greenhouse effect and making the situation of the climate change even worse. And the majority of scientists right now, they consider the Industrial Revolution of the 18th century caused the first human emissions of carbon. And since the middle of the 20th century, the carbon concentration growth was measured every single year. And through this, we definitely understand that we are doing some impact on our planet. So 50 years ago, average temperature was around 15 degrees of Celsius, and now this temperature is growing. So for this period of time, it has grown for a little bit near 1.5 or 2 degrees of the Celsius, and this is direct influence on the human activity. And what are the sources of the green gas effect? So actually, as I told, this is our activity, and this is scientific proved evidence. Different industries like the energy, transport, and so on and so forth cause near 64% of the entire greenhouse gas emissions. While, for example, agriculture, there is a popular myth that agriculture is doing a lot. Yes, it's doing a little bit, but it's only 14%, and definitely international tourism is doing about 5%, and you can see the forestry is doing around 17%. So 64% of the activities are directly connected with the industry and business and manufacturing that are doing these greenhouse emissions. So, and if you take by the sector, you can see that the majority of the emissions are actually located with the power station activity, then industrial processes 16%, transportation fuels 14%, and agriculture, for example, products 12%, and others. And in the majority of cases, when we are talking about the greenhouse gases emissions, we mean the carbon dioxide. So this carbon emissions, because it's around 72% of the total gases that we as humanity emit. And what is interesting here, which should we take to the account, that around 100 out of 100 biggest companies emitters, they cost 71% of the global greenhouse emissions in 2017. And this is a beautiful map that actually shows the location of these big companies. You can see the majority of them are situated in the United States, in the Northern America, are situated in China, and also you can see some of them located in the territory of European Union, and even a beautiful company of DTEC that is a Ukrainian company. So these companies could be blamed for these greenhouse gas emissions, at least for the 2017 year. And what is important for us, for political scientists, to understand here that this is not just the clear business, because 1/3, so 32% of them are public-private companies. So it's a PPP, a private-public partnership. That means that states are involved into this business, and this is a big issue of the regulations. What also could be taken from this presentation is that you can see that Africa, Latin America, so Southern America, and Australia are doing much lesser than the Northern Hemisphere. So, and this is a very important point for us to understand how the diversity issue is influencing how we can see the difference between the activities of the more richer north and more poorer south, if you took like this neo-structuralist rhetorics. So as I told, we can see the increase of the climate change transformation that is coming from the middle of the 20th century, and since 1960s and 1970s, you can see the rapid increase of the global temperature up to 1.5 degree of Celsius. That was mainly caused by the human activity. And definitely you can see that in the previous times there were also very natural increases of temperature. So look, for example, at the 1825, you can see this red dots present here. But what we can see right now is exactly the influence of the human activity towards the global warming. And many researchers and many analytics and many modeling, so now we can model, so we can use the behavioral methods and to do the modeling, are showing that without the stop of such activity, without the stop of such behavior, we gonna warm our global temperatures really rapidly. And there is a beautiful map by NASA. This is prediction until the 2050, but it's very strong prediction. You can see that, for example, the Middle East and North Africa and South Europe are gonna burn in the summer. So, and even in Ukraine, you can fix the temperature more than 30 degrees of Celsius in July. That is more than for 3 or even 4 degrees of Celsius that we have naturally in the summer for these months. And here a number of questions actually are created. So what we can do with that, a number of problems they can caused by this growing of temperature, like the issue of migration or the issue of adaptation, or for example, the issue of the fresh water, and so on and so forth. So this is not the problem that is created only because of the changes of the temperature. That is like one step in the number of different steps that are leading to the major more problems that usually the politicians are and society are facing. So, but how we can measure climate change? How we can understand that really it's happening? So, as I told you, temperature is one of the good measurement positions. So, through the temperature growth, average temperature growth, we can understand that something is going much more rapidly than what was used to be by the very natural process. Also, we can see by the increase of the or decrease of the rainfalls and snowfalls, and we can see directly the drying trends that are happening in our times, and it's also predictions that if you won't stop the present behavior, if we want to preserve the situation, we can see the increase of the deserts and of the dry lands in our Earth, especially in the territory of the Caribbean American, and also on the northern Africa and southern Europe. And this is one side of the problem of the drying trends. But the other side of the problem is, together with these drying trends, also the extreme rains and extreme snowfalls are increased, and that definitely caused to floods. And there's definitely cost to the not clear water that could be used by the citizens. And one of the reasons also is one of the measures is also the increase of the global sea level. So it's changing. It's also changing because the ices are melting. Then it is also the effect of the climate change, but also it's a very natural process when the global sea level is changing. However, like the temperature, we can see very strong trends of the growing the level of the global sea near 3 millimeters per year what we have right now. And it's very dramatic because if the ices are more melting, we will see the increase in this number of the sea territories, of the water territories, and this is definitely one of the dangers for the cities that are located near this seashore or near the river shore. Yeah, we also can judge and have this metrics of the climate change by the ice melting. Like in Arctic, there is melting around 50,000 of square kilometers per 10 years. That is very dramatic and fast. And also with the Antarctic ice melting, that is a little bit slower here, but nevertheless we also see the trends of growing. So probably even here, especially in the Arctic area, you can see a number of different photos that are made from the space, that we don't see much ice right now as it used to be. And one of the important measures that or indicators by which we can measure the climate change is also the growth of different storms, floods, and tsunami. And if you look through statistics, you can also see that the hydrological cause of the natural disasters increased, yes, dramatically increased, starting from the 80s. So this very blue line, you can see that at least in the number of cases per year, we can see much more storms and floods. And probably you remember all the storms that happening in the United States, or and these floods, or even in Europe. And we have a number of these photos and evidences that it's influencing our life. So, but why climate change is so important for political science? Why we take it as a global issue? Because indeed this is a global issue. If some of the country or corporation or whatever behaves badly, that means that in terms of environment, we can see the result and the impact on all the other countries and human beings. So the impact of the climate change is so dangerous that it can't be located to the specific area. And this probably is the most dangerous issue that we are taking, because the impact is really huge, and it's not short-lasting, so it's very long-lasting effect. And definitely by impact we can understand that this is a serious trouble to the policymakers all around the world, because the increase of water is definitely of the sea is definitely influencing these coastal cities and make the possibility of their disappearing. So there is an intergovernmental panel on the climate change. There is a combination of different scientists and policymakers that are regulating and studying the cases of the climate change. So, and they predicted that if we doesn't change our behavior once more, we can have the increase of global sea level up near 50 to 100 centimeters in the next, let's say, 80 years. And this is very dramatic because it would influence the coastal lines and coastal cities, at least in the North Africa, and also some cities of the Latin America and the United States, but more dramatically it would influence on the number of the Asian states that are located in the on the islands. And there is a danger that some of the cities will disappear. There's also a number of data and modeling that is showing that if we face the growth more than like 10 meters of the sea. Once more, this is modeling for 1 meter, up to 1 meter, yes. But if you take 10 meters, we can see the disappearance of such cities as Hamburg or Berlin at all, or, for example, San Francisco and other cities globally. These are the major cities that are at risk from the growth of the sea level. And you can see this is prediction by the 2050, and these are the major cities, yes. And that doesn't mean that they can feel this situation, but there is very good connection in the number of the sea growth and the danger that is coming to the city. So you can see that these are majority of cities located, the great capitals, big cities, multi-million cities that are located in the coastal areas. And once more, this is not only the danger for one city, because it's definitely caused the effect of migration of citizens. It caused the number of challenges to the healthcare system. Also, this influence should be somehow rebuilt or stopped, so that means that we will spend more to solve this situation, and so on and so forth. So this is not only one problem, it causes a number of the problem in the complex. Also, as we talk a little bit, the influence of the climate change, the impact of the climate change is in the increased number of floodings and storms that are happening in the globally. So you can also compare by the data from our world in data that the number of the floods, yes, dramatically increased from the 70s. So this is a blue lines on this diagram. And also the extreme weather. You can also see the red diagrams, the red fields. So this is what we directly see from the temperature changes. And the flooding and storms is also a difficult problem because according to the number of surveys, it not only caused people fatalities or people deaths, but the huge economic costs that are spent like to clean up the situation, to stop this situation. And what is more dramatic, that in terms that it also raises the question of inequity, because the states with low income or lower middle income are probably the major target here, because they don't have the necessary resources to predict or to postpone the situation. So they don't have the much influence on the ongoing impact of the floods. And if you take to account, you should also take to account that it's not only happening with the sea shores, but also with the river shores. So the rivers are also subject of making these damages. And definitely the big storms that are happening probably in the American continent, and we remember the storm of tornadoes and of Katrina and others, but also the cost of the climate change, because the natural behavior of the storm is changing. And in terms of the economic impact of floods, at least in the United States, you can see that since 1980s, at least 260 billion of the US dollars were cost, actually the country spent to cope with this situation, to cool down this situation, and the much of this cost and flooding is passed on to the taxpayers. So this means that we have increased, first of all, in the number of costs that are spent, but also we have the increase of the on our taxes if we face this situation. Ukraine was pretty the same with the Transcarpathian region when we have a number of floodings. All these financial issues were solved mainly through by the state, and there definitely were private donors, but the majority, it was a big push on us, on the taxpayers. Yeah. The other negative impact and very hard impact is the heat waves and droughts. And the heat waves are very dangerous because naturally they could come. They're very rarely predictable. So we can expect them happening in the summer, but sometimes they're not happening. Sometimes they are. And it's very hard to predict them. So you probably remember the very hot summer before in 2003. It was also happening here in Ukraine, but in Europe there is an estimation that during this heat wave of 2003, near 70,000 of people were killed because of the high temperature on the streets. And what is interesting here, that the likability of these heat waves is increasing nowadays. So nowadays we have 5 times more likely heat waves than comparing to the middle of the 20th century, to the 50s or 60s. And if this tendency will be kept, we will have 12 times more. It's not in 15; it should be in 50. So we'll have the 5 times more such situation happening closer to the 50. And in general, the temperature of 2003 could be the average temperature in the 2050. So now we're considering these heat waves to be extremes, but in 2050 it could be like the normal weather in the sun. And what about droughts? Droughts is also a very important problem. So with the changes and in the increase of the temperature, we can see that this drought lands that is happening. That means that it's not only impact the agriculture, however, its impact is huge. It's huge because it influences the possibility for the agriculture industry to work normally and for us to get normal food. But it's also changing the situations inside of the sociological groups, of the social groups. They need also to migrate from these drought areas. They need to have the water supply, the normal water supply. There is also the questions to the health issues, because in the warmer climate, the more problems appeared to the health issues, especially on the areas that are not considered to be naturally warm, and so on and so forth. So on this graphic, you don't see the major extremes that are happening, but definitely we can see that the level of the severe droughts is a little bit, and moderate drought is a little bit increasing from year to year. And as I told, one of the major problems here is not only about the foods and not only about the agricultural production or migration, but also with the access to the drinking water. And the water became unsafe. It's more harder to get this water, especially in the African area, where there is a natural problems of getting the good water. And you can see that even here in the chart by Statista, if you take like this almost 40-year period, unsafe water killed more people than during the conflicts on natural disasters. And with this drought, the unsafe water or absence of the drinking water would create a tremendous problems. So, and not be only located in Africa. And there's definitely influencing the problem of hunger that still exist in our life, because without the good supply of water, without the good supply of the natural lands that are ready to do the agricultural production, so we can see the famine or hunger that could come. So what is good here, that comparing to the last year's, according to the global hunger index, the number of the mortalities or fatalities because of hunger is rapidly decreasing, and this is an influence of our life that is becoming a little bit better. However, you can see the same areas of Africa, Middle or Africa South, and Sahara area, or for example, the areas of the Southeastern Asia or South Asia, that these are areas where the majority of possibilities for droughts are possible. So that definitely means that the climate changes, if they cause much drought, they definitely bring much hungers to problems to this area. So we should consider this complexity of the one issue that is coming to another. So here, this systematic approach works perfectly, of one problem causing the other. So, and we can be sure that these hunger indexes that are decreasing will not be increased. And one of the important issues and the impacts is definitely the impact on biodiversity, all the species on our planet. And you can see also from the chart from the UN report of biodiversity in 2018 that they stated that only 1/6 of all known species on Earth are on the verge of the extinction. And there is dramatic growth of the percentage of these animals and species that are under danger. So it's coming closer with the amphibians up to 2.5% of since like the end of the 19th century. And what is interesting also here, that many of the countries are starting their own strategies of the preservance of the biodiversity. And you can see on also by this graphic, the 13th, for example, percent of the countries meet the targets of the forest protected areas, and 25% of countries meet the target for critical habitat protection, and only 7% for the marine protected areas. Well, in the majority of cases, this issue is not still regulated, and the most beautiful situation is in Europe, that also preserved the number of these territories, while if you're talking about the developing countries, about Asia, about Africa, and some countries of the Southern America, this is a huge problem, because the percentage of these actions and of the protection areas and species is not really so high. And so biodiversity on the planet is also a very important point, but we have also one impact in terms of the natural resources. So you probably heard about the Earth's ecological debt. So now it's called the Earth's overshoot day, and this is the calculated illustrative calendar date on which humanity resource consumption for the year exceed the number of these resources that our planet can do for this year. So and if you look on this graph at let's say at the beginning of the 70s, it was very natural, because the Earth's ecological debt, or let's say the overshoot day, was closed for the 1st January. That means if you take the period of 1 year, we use these resources of the planet, both like animals and for the food and agriculture and like the natural resources, whatever you can take. And planet had the capacity to regenerate these resources. But now, in 2018, at least, we need more than one planet. We need almost 1.75 planet of Earth to regenerate these resources per year. And globally, we have this overshoot day that that usually can see a country, how countries are using their resources, yes. But globally, if you take the global perspective, this global overshoot day this year had to be on the end of the June. So this means on the June, globally, we use more resources than our planet could produce. And the danger issue here is that if we are much more closer to the start of the year, that means that we simply steal these resources and productivity of our planet from the future generation. And here you can see the number of different countries, how they behave, how they're using these resources. And for Ukraine, is July 24th, together with the Paraguay, that was the overshoot day for Ukraine. Fortunately, because of coronavirus, these are not the fixed days for this year. This is an influence of coronavirus when we don't see the estimation right now, so probably the calculation will be further. But these global overshoot days and overshoot days for the majority of the country will be postponed for the later periods. But overall, like July, and this is the 8 months. Yes, this is really dangerous in terms of the resource consumption. One of the most important issue is we were discussing probably the long-term effects, yes, but we definitely have the situation that is happening right now, and that are connected with the global natural disasters. So you can see here on this chart the number of the deaths of the people fatalities because of the natural disasters. So hopefully it's not so many people, and hopefully the number of people fatalities are decreasing here. And in terms of the percentage of natural disasters, the share of global deaths, you can also see that this number is not so big. It's almost 0.4-0.5% of the global fatalities. However, once more, this is what we have right now, and we can't predict that the next global disaster or some regional disaster will not cause the negative effects and could not cause like the fatalities, the people fatalities because of it. And what is also important here, that the climate change is not only the social issue or political issue, but it's also the economical issue. So it also impacts our economy largely. And what is this impact? So first of all, we should state here that it's very difficult to calculate the overall huge situation. So here is a very good field for comparative studies. And you can see the comparative economic situation on the different countries. But in general, you can see that in 2000, at least here by the data by Statista, in 2016, almost 130 billion of US dollars were spent for the economic. They were not spent, but this is economic losses for the of the climate change. And I can think that this is only direct economic losses, because if you take the indirect economic losses, And if you take all these disasters, I think that the price will be much more higher. And in terms of the percentage of the global GDP, you can also see that it's in different periods it was even up to 0.5% of the global GDP, and there is really huge number of costs that are spent for or not getted by the global economy because of the climate change and of the global disasters. And there is also a trick here because we can see a little bit decrease of the numbers, yes, if you are not taking like these extremes of 2005 or of 2011 or 2017. But the trick is that overall each year the humanity becoming more and more richer. That means that our costs in terms of percentage are spending more and more. And we, for example, might therefore expect that for the future generations, yes, any given disaster will, for example, double or even triple the economic cost that we spend right now. So they're becoming more and more higher. So a number of countries are also doing interesting estimations. So unfortunately, I don't find many of them. But for example, United States, they studied a little bit this situation, and they also by the Stanford University, and they have this special project. If you are interested, you can look through that, and they started modeling what is the cause of the climate change or the temperature increase for their economy. And they came to the conclusion that every 2% of the warming that is happening right now will lead to the end of this 100 years up to 2100, yes, that US would suffer annual losses equivalent to around 0.5% of the GDP. So if the global temperature increase will be around 2 degrees of Celsius. That is really predictable. And if you take the present situation, this 0.5% of the US GDP is around 500,000 of billions of US dollars. So you can take the real money of that actually country losing because the increase of the temperature. And I can so I don't see the many of the good estimations for the other countries, but if you compare all these challenges, I think this is the huge numbers that are paid indirectly by the economies to have this to suffer from these conditions. And but nevertheless, the same research, and if you take the climate change effect per capita, you can also see that the majority of the underdeveloped countries, the countries that are developing in the Latin American and also in Africa especially, but also Australia here will have the percentage change in per capita. So people will lose money, and the countries will be definitely affected by the issue of the changes of temperature. So here I come to the little bit conclusion that the climate change is not a matter of science anymore. Yes, it's the matter of the policy and what the policy makers can take, what actions they can take right now, like to stop this negative impact of the climate change because of the human behavior. So what was done already to limit the climate change? Actually, a number of different issues. So I will just name only a few initiatives on the global level and on the national level. And if I take in the global level, I will take also the biggest one, because on the different parts and the different times, there were also a number of the concrete agreements between the countries of region. So I'm taking here the global initiatives. So the first one and the larger one actually was initiative was taken while of the Earth, so-called Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and it was a 2-week summit, and it was the first ever the global level discussion of the politicians on the scientists of the impact of the climate change. And at the end of these 2 weeks, actually the three declarations or three conventions were adopted on the global level, and they together they're called like the Rio Convention. But these are probably the three conventions. So the first one was the Convention on Biological Diversity. That was the agreement between the states that they should preserve the biological diversity, and the country were given like the simple instrument: if they ratify this convention, if they are the signatory of this convention, they can later make this a part of their legislation, and they will not push to the countries of taking some targets, but they can identify targets and follow these instructions and help of the international organizations. The same story with the United Nations Convention to combat desertification and to preserve forests and the lands that could be used for agriculture. The same story. So countries were not obliged to have any of the targets. They could ratify, and then they could like proclaim that they will do some steps over that. And the most importantly here was the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is the long-lasting convention, because on the basis of the convention, the other conventions which affecting the greenhouse limitations were created, and also this convention itself was a combination of the states that formed like the organization inside the United Nations, and they have their own secretaries, they have their own staff, so they are operating like convention is operating as the organization. Or actually the organization that is called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, yes, is a separate body as a result of this convention. And it was the first ever convention that faced and started regulating the issues of greenhouse limitations. To make it clear, it was not legally binding. Yes, conventions, so they were pretty open. Everybody can join it, or if the country decided not to join it, that was no problem. That is why the majority of the countries, they simply become like the participating states, but they didn't ratify this convention, so it not became the part of their legislation. And once more, there were no binding instruments, or for example financial instruments to control the countries. So in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol in Japan was adopted, and it was revision of this Rio Convention, because people like the analysts see that in 5 years there was not so many change. And why Kyoto Protocol was important? Because it was scientific consensus. Yes, how to reduce global warming by reducing the greenhouse effect. Before that, there were a lot of literature and materials, and the position of the countries were really different. So some of them, they were not like expecting, or they were not proclaiming that indeed the greenhouse effect is causing the climate change. But here in 1997, there were so many researchers, and there were so many evidences that in the scientific community there was consensus that the most effective way to stop the global warming is by reducing the greenhouse effect that was caused by the human activities. So this convention was also very broad. This convention was not doesn't have any specific targets what countries should have, but so countries could themselves identify what they can have as a target for the reduction. But what is interesting here that this convention introduced further the principles of common but different responsibilities. That means that more developed countries, they have more responsibilities by comparing to the developing countries. This convention has two annexes to that, so it was revised several times, and actually the first annex to this convention bring the flexibility mechanism that it calls the marginal costs. This is what was used in the majority of the countries. You probably know this scheme. When Ukraine, for example, or other countries, they took their obligations here by the annex if they ratified this convention, yes, to reduce, for example, the amount of the carbon emissions, and we have these limits. We have these limits that were identified in numbers, and if the country didn't use the limit, the other country could simply buy the limit of this country and produce more. For example, Ukraine at the beginning of the 2000s, so especially near 2005, 6, so these years in the middle of the 2000s, we were not using our limits. And that means that Japan, for example, was buying these quotas, they called quotas, our quotas, and paying us money. And this money could be spent only, for example, in Ukrainian case, for renewable industries. That is why the friends of Yanukovych, for example, Kolesnikov, they built a number of the renewable stations because they were using like this money at the grants. But also these grants were issued to the small and medium enterprises, so everybody can be a part of it. So this system of the marginal cost was also introduced. However, the research, the evaluation of this convention, of the Kyoto Protocol, make the results that the global emissions increased by 32% from 1990s and 2010. So it was not really pushing a lot. So that is why in 2015 there was another revision like this Paris Agreement, so-called Paris Agreement. It was not actually the revision of the Kyoto Protocol, it was additional convention that is operating together with in the framework of the conventions of the climate change and the framework of the Kyoto Protocol. And you can see that the majority of states become like the participants of this convention. However, not all of them ratified them. That means that states didn't take the obligations. But on the same period of time, the countries have the vision that if, for example, at least 55% of the most 55% of polluters will ratify this agreement, that means that the convention will be effective and they meet their own target. So of the 79 states ratified, there is a little bit more, it's like around 57% of the 55% of polluters, but except of Iran, Turkey, they're the major polluters. But also, you know that United States, Donald Trump, he brought that idea that United States will get out from this Paris Agreement. However, the nearest time when they can be dropped out of the convention is coming at the end of the November 2020, so it will be after the election. So we don't know how actually the situation will turn. However, it's important to know that United States, even as a signatory and the country who ratified this convention, in the last years they were not using these targets and obligations they were signing through this convention. So what were the main ideas of this Paris Agreement? It was to reach the 2%, actually to decrease the level of the climate change, the level of the temperature growing to 2%, degrees of Celsius above the pre-industrial limit, and limit increased to 1.5 Celsius degree right now. Yes, so to reach the limit that was before the pre-industrial level. Also, through this Paris Agreement, every country had to determine, plan, and report about their own emission target. So this convention became a part of their national legislation. The targets were fixed, and they had to plan it and to report it. And such big first evaluation will happen in 2023. And here there are also some judicial mechanisms through which countries that have failed to succeed here with the decrease of emissions will also see some financial challenges. So they're a little bit discussed, but if the countries will pay fines, but some financial challenges be present here. But the general idea was to reduce emissions by 20%, so it's very general, not for the concrete year, but general. To reduce emissions by 20%, to increase the renewable energy market to 20%, and to make the 20% of the industry energy efficient. So we will see how the Paris Agreement will be used, but today this is the most recent, like the global one, the global agreement that regulates this situation. And why is this important on the global level? Because you can see here that the emissions will be increasing if the growth of emissions, and if you take no climate policies or keep the current climate policies, they will cause the increase of the temperature. And now we know the situation that increase in temperature will lead to the dramatic results in the future in terms of the different other aspects, and definitely cause the natural disasters. The UN Sustainable Development Goals was also a very broad instrument on the global level in terms of the climate change, but not specifically here. So for the main idea of the Sustainable Development Goals that were created in 2015 after the so-called Millennium Goals finished, so this agenda finished, the operationality. So, and these development goals were setting a number of 17 goals and 169 different tasks for all the governments, for all the societies, NGOs, businesses all over the world to reach the national tasks until 2030, and by this to reach the global tasks until 2030. So, and here you can also see that a few issues, like for example the goal number 7, affordable and clean energy, or responsible consumption and production, 12, or for example 6, clean water or climate action, like 13, and 14 and 15 also goals are directly connected with the issue of the climate change. But the idea here of the sustainable development of SDG, of sustainable development goals, is that the natural resources, the natural issues directly influence, for example, the biological issues. And biological issues and natural issues together, they directly influence the social issues and economical issues. So everything is here interconnected, and this is like the main principles then the states and the industries and the businesses can use to work in this field. And how they are doing this? Simply by implementing the strategies, like the national strategy, or for example, the business strategy, how they can reach this or that goal that is mostly connected with the activities of this company. And they also are the subject of annual reporting, not only financial, but also non-financial reporting of how they achieve these goals and the targets that they set. One of the important issues is that the climate change issues is not only about the overall state regulations and political life, but also it influences different spheres. And here I just want to show you the beautiful encyclical letter by Pope Francis Laudato Si that was created in 2015, and that is really important both for the Christian community and Catholic community, but also in terms of bringing religious perspective to the climate change and to the natural preservation. And indeed, this is really great because there is a combination of different parts of the different fields that could be right now the interconnected. So Laudato Si is encyclical letter that consists of 6 different chapters, and here Pope took the approach of letting us know and letting the church know, church community know the observation and impact of society of climate change, like the roots of the human behavior. So here Pope Francis is also writing that the human behavior, technological booming, uncontrolled technological booming is bringing like this climate effects and natural effects. And with this, then we should focus more on the international solidarity, on the personal responsibility, and on the local actions, and also by the ecological education in schools, universities, and church overall. So the principle of observe, evaluate, and act was introduced in this encyclical letter, and here what was important here, besides the other factors, that Pope is also using this systematic approach. So he writes directly that we are a part of the nature, including it, and thus in constant interaction with it. And he links profit over the impact on poor with the abuse of the environment. So if we do not use the resources correctly and logically, and if we harm, for example, those who are in need, that the conception here in the Laudato Si that we abuse the environment because we are taking the human beings and the creation of God together with the nature all these resources. But it's also interesting here that now Catholic social teaching includes teaching on the environment. So it became a very integral part of the Catholic social teaching. And Pope also focus on the scientific research. So several times in the Laudato Si, he brings the idea that scientific research on the environment is to be praised and to be used. So it's not only like the matter of belief, but it's also the matter of the science, the logical science that could be incorporated into our teaching, into our observations, evaluations, and of our actions. So, and the most important here is also the issue of the global solidarity that could be found like in the last chapters. He pushed a lot to the challenge of the developing countries. So he's directly saying that they can't do so. This is like in the political science, it's called the free riders problem. So if some of the countries and some of the industries and businesses, they are still considering them, somebody will do that. So we are limited in resources, we are really poor, we can't do nothing, so somebody will do that. And Pope is calling to those that no, this is a global solidarity, so everybody could do. But more, he is pushing towards the developed countries, that you take responsibility of using these natural resources, you take the responsibility of being more effective, so please take here the responsibility for those who are not so successful as you, because without you, they can't fix all these problems. And there is two beautiful quotes that I like. So the first one, we have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And we are faced not with the two separate crises, one environmental but one social, but rather with one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental. And strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protecting our nature. So this is a beautiful encyclical letter that is really strategically and systemically taking different parts of this problem, and it was translated into Ukrainian language. So if you would like, you can read it. Yeah, on the national level, so these are like the larger initiatives. On the global level, definitely there are, for example, Copenhagen Agreement, like there are many more on the international level, but they're not like on the global scale. So these are the more fundamental, but these are not the only one. And there are definitely more initiatives in the also in different communities, including the religion communities. So, but in terms of the national level initiatives, definitely in the last 2 years, we are talking a lot about the increase of so-called the Green New Deals. So, in a number of countries. So. Here, to some major extent, as a concept, as a paper, and somewhere as a regulation, it was created in the United States, in UK, in the European Union, also in Australia, like a green plan, in Canada and South Korea, and in the other countries. But nevertheless, I would rather say that these are attempts. So this is not the legally binding documents, except of European Union that we will talk right now. So I will like slightly focus on the USA, UK, and EU experience here, but it's also a question for the comparative study, so you can compare how different countries are moving there. So United States, this issue was risen like at the 80s and 90s, but it was not so strong. But as an issue, as a political issue, it was also brought to the political agenda by mainly the Green Party platform, Jill Stein, in 2006. And they created this document as Green New Deal that is connected with the New Deal period and New Deal document that was after the Great American Depression. So, but here the New Deal, so it's showing like this crisis connections. And the main idea was like to push the process of making U.S. economy more eco-friendly, and, for example, to reach 100% of renewable energy to until 2030. That is. Yeah, you saw that the number of the polluters are actually from the United States, so it was really crazy idea. But nevertheless, this rhetoric was used by a number of Democratic candidates, so, because the Green Party platform is not the huge party. However, this Jill Stein during like the presidential campaigns every year was bringing that agenda. And in the majority of cases, to my mind, the appearance of the Green New Deal in the American policy starting in 2018 when it became a part of the Democratic Party rhetoric, especially that is connected with the so-called Sunrise Movement that was addressing the leaders of the Democratic Party to bring this issue. And one of the many very noticeable periods was like the Sunrise Movement's protests on the Nancy Pelosi's office, who is the leader of the Democrats in the House, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the one of the active figures, active players inside the Democratic Party. So she supported like the Sunrise Movement, and together with the other senators, they brought this issue to the discussion. So in 2018, more than 600 different ecological organizations inside the United States, together they have like the voter support around 5 million of people, if I'm not mistaken. So that they signed the Green New Deal support letter and addressed it to Congress. And the House of Committee, actually the House of Congress, it is a lower this palette of Congress. So they had to create a special House Committee on the climate crisis that they called. And so the discussion period started. Actually, they failed the first reading of this Green New Deal as a part of the US legislation because Republicans blocked it, and because of the really, I would say, really strict ideas. Because, for example, they proclaimed decarbonization until 2035 with the closing of every factory. There is not working of the renewable. For example. And the people who were working on these factories and all these industries had to be like re-educated for the other industry that called a number of the costs that should be spent. So that's very hard issue, and they failed it. However, like in the political agenda, at least within the Democratic Party, now the Green New Deal and these appeals become as an integral part. Pretty the same was story in the United Kingdom. So in 2008, the Green New Deal group started this discussion. They also introduced the Green New Deal to the Great Britain, and with the idea of decarbonization until the 2030. So and this rhetoric was also first addressed by the green platforms, and later in 2019 it became one of the official parts of the Labour Party rhetorics, and it's really connected with the Caroline Lucas, who is pushing this agenda. And if you talk about the European Union, so I will start from the point that on January 15th, 2020, European Parliament voted to make European Green Deal as a part of the European legislation. So the most successful case. And it interests me because this is a really comprehensive strategy to make EU climate neutral until the 2050. So Ursula von der Leyen, she announced that it was one of her first announcements that European continent should be climate neutral until the middle of the 50th century. So they created concrete 50 targets, and even more right now, that should be implemented in every country, member country of the European Union. And this it will be so this targets are in the fields of the circular economy, on the renovations, on the biodiversity and natural preservation, but also in the farming and innovation. So, and for example, there is also a target here to lower the greenhouse emissions for 2030 at least 50% compared with the 90s. So, and it's really interesting because it's also regulating not only the European field, but also the relations of the European companies, for example, with the companies of the not European countries. That means directly that, for example, if Ukrainian business wants to do wants to do export of their goods to the European market, it also should follow the regulations of the Green New Deal. So this is really, really new. Now it was a little bit stopped, but the countries should continue the process of the ratification and making these concrete targets, 50 targets, at the part of their national legislations. So that was what was done here and how we can respond in general. So I'll introduce you a few ideas that was brought by the Robert Cohen. You probably remember that we were discussing it during the political theory classes. So he made a very interesting proposal that actually we can focus on these actually five frameworks. The first framework is mitigation, that means the emission limitation that we have right now. So that means that who produce more should pay more. And that definitely makes some impact on the taxpayers, which in democracies means voters. As we may know, this is very dramatic because not all of the countries and not all of the businesses really want to pay. And here, actually, the free riders dilemma existed because without the concrete mechanisms, legally binding mechanisms that became part of the legislation, and once more, we have an example of, for example, of United States who can decide later to be dropped out from these agreements. But nevertheless, it's really hard to engage them into that, and we don't have the concrete mechanisms on the international level to control everybody. So this is a willing process, and here the free riders problem really exists. The adaptation could also be one of the approach that human beings can live in the warmer climate. But that's mean definitely the huge investment into our lifestyle. For example, this question of the warming climate in Africa or in the Middle East, they simply mean that what we can do and what the societies can do to invest more. But adaptation is really it's one of the possible issues together with the mitigation. So if we can't change our behavior, so we need to think how to adapt our lifestyle for the warmer climate and warmer planet. Building new infrastructure to generate electric power without the emissions of the carbon emissions. It was a great challenge, and I think in the recent years, because you see it's an old article, but in the recent years, a number of these steps were done, and definitely we have the powerful figure here of Elon Musk, who is pushing that agenda. However, this present situation with oil and with gas that is happening in our world can crush this industry because it can't compete. So it can't compete without the influence of the government and without the support of this government. So the entire the Elon Musk industry and the Tesla industry was supported by the grants of the government, but now with these prices for oil, it's so we can talk about the great competence. But nevertheless, it could also be a way that if you refuse, for example, for these fossils and build some new structures. So the solar radiation management, this is very fantastic ideas, but also possible to think over, that we can put some particles into orbit that will reflect the sunshine, yes, and reduce the temperatures on the Earth. This definitely, even if it is fantastic, nevertheless, it's possible. But this is also an issue of the international collaboration. Once more, the inequity problem. Not all the countries can afford to do this. and the mitigation structure to reduce benefits for opposition. That means that if you behave good with the emission limitations, you can have some benefits. If not, so you'll be cut off the benefits, for example, support of the state, or for example, the international trade quotas, and so on and so forth. So these are the possible scenarios which we might think that consider for the future how to behave. And this is a very interesting case for the political scientists. What scenario, in what situation we can focus. So let us make the very short follow-up on this topic. Climate change is a very important global issue and indeed affects our well-being. So it's not the new phenomenon, it's very natural phenomenon, yes, climate change. But unfortunately, due to the technological boom, we influence the speed of this phenomena. And we influence this by the greenhouse gas emissions and the use of the natural resources. How can we measure the climate change? Definitely with the temperature increase, with the rainfalls, global sea level, ice melting, and the number of the natural disasters that are happening by each year. Why it is important for policy making? Because there's a number of different problems that are standing together with the issue of the climate change, like the coastal cities disappearance that definitely goes to the economical losses, to the people migration, to the people security, to the, for example, the strengths of the country, or the strengths of some region or the few countries, so on and so forth. So it's not only the single problem. Also flooding, storms, droughts, and water shortages, hunger, biodiversity, and human health and the human life after all. What is the economic impact of the climate change? So it's hard to estimate, but a little bit, around 130 billion of USD losses on the losses in 2016, or the other research is showing 0.45% of the global GDP in 2017. Here, we should remember that we become richer because we use more resources, then these numbers will also increase in the future years. So what was done in the policy making here by now? So on the global level, Rio Convention, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, SDG, there's a mistake here, Sustainable Development Goals, Laudato Si, the Papal Laudato Si encyclical letter, and many other conventions. This is the hugest one. And on the national level, besides the national legislation, this is also the Green New Deal movement that offers the possibility to bring these issues into the national legislation. So I just want to stop here probably, but raise a few questions that I would like to discuss with you the next class. And this, to my mind, is one of the important and interesting questions for the political scientists that we should focus. First, how to reframe issues of the climate change in the way that make political action feasible. So how make this a great agenda? Unfortunately, we can see that these issues, like for that Greta Thunberg brought, this language that was brought, and that it is not like it's not used, and it's not overall supported by all countries, wherever the problem still exists. Under what conditions do which types of countries generate a constructive political discourse on these issues? This is a very interesting point. So what are conditions that are needed for countries to do a step, and for businesses, for example, to do a step? Should it be only be crisis situation, or what are the possible platforms? How we can work with that? Does the vulnerability of different states to climate change drive their policy on the global warming treaty? Other regions, they may benefit economically from the climate change, and how that may occur, and are they interested actually to have some benefits? Other political ideas and political actions actually done because of understanding that the economical benefit will be if, for example, we have too warm situation in the Middle East. and how, for example, emotions, including fear and other emotions, play a role in human reactions to the long-term natural process, such as those involved to the climate change. So should be the climate change a very personal issue? And what, in case yes, what the state policies should be like to have such construction on the discourses inside of their countries and globally. So thank you for this long lecture, but I hope interesting, and see you on the next class.